The use of detention centres is a highly controversial issue in the UK. Here to discuss this with me is Mary Boswell, reader in criminology and fellow at St Cross College at the University of Oxford. So, Mary, what's the purpose of detention centres?
The official purpose of removal centres, they're actually called immigration removal centres, is to facilitate the removal of migrants who have no right to remain in the UK. They are also for some people used as a location where you can hold somebody while you try and establish their claims for asylum, and so while you're trying to establish their identity.
So who's actually in these detention centres then?
There's quite a variety of people who are held in detention centres. There are people there who are failed asylum seekers, so who have tried for asylum but have found their case has been found to have no merit. There are visa overstayers, so people who may have come in with a student visa or a work visa and overstayed the terms of that visa. There are people who have been found in the country with no visa at all, so who were smuggled in. And then there are also now ex-foreign national prisoners, some of whom are people who've lived in the UK for a very long time, and some of whom are more recent arrivals who offended, soon after arriving.
So could you give me an approximate idea of how many people are actually in these centres?
On any one day, there's between about 2,500 people in detention or to 2,800 people in detention. And that figure should be placed in comparison to the numbers of people who live in the community who have overstayed the terms of their visa. And so we've recently been told by the government that there are over 180,000 people in the community who the UK Border Agency know are in breach of their visa conditions.
So what are detention centres actually like?
I would say that there's three main kinds of detention centres. There are, in the system, there are currently 10 with an 11th about to open, and 3 of those, with the one that's about to open as well, are run by the prison service. And so they're either wings of existing prisons or they're in former prisons. Then there are 2 very high security ones that have been built, one at Heathrow Airport and the other one at Gatwick. And both of those have been built to what's called a Category B prison standard, and that means that the detainees are in very small rooms, which in prisons would be called cells, that there's no fresh air, that the glass is frosted so you can't see outside, and that the movement within the centre is highly restricted. And then there's the third kind, where they are more like an open prison, and so the detainees can move around the centre in what would be called free flow from about 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock at night, accessing the work and education. All of the detention centres have to offer English as a second language. They have to offer some kind of IT, either in training or support, so that detainees can go online and email their friends and family and lawyers. They also have to offer arts and crafts and leisure activities.
So these are prison-like environments. What are the alternatives?
I guess there are 4 alternatives. One alternative would be to abolish them, although I think there's probably no political appetite for that, and it would raise questions about how you would locate people in order to deport them. One alternative is a system that the Home Office is just bringing in, which is called pre-departure accommodation, which is it's more like an open prison, so subject to risk assessments. Detainees might be allowed to leave the secure perimeter for the day to perhaps go shopping or to go to church or to do something in the community. Then I think the UK could consider options that have been tried in other countries like Australia and Sweden, such as non-secure housing in the community, where you put them in a council house and you know where they are and you subject them to stringent reporting requirements. And then I think the fourth option would be something different, like electronic tagging, so that you would know where they were through the technology of the tag.
So this brings us to a fundamental question, which is, do detention centres actually work?
I think the question about whether or not detention centres work must depend very much on what we think detention centres are for. And so if detention centres are for facilitating the removal of the people who are within them, then certainly on one level they are fairly successful, because statistics show that 2/3 of the population in any given year are deported. Now that still leaves a fairly large number of 1/3 of the population who are released back into the community, either on bail or temporary admission. So for those people, arguably this purpose of detention to remove is not working. Another argument that's often raised about detention centres is that they act as a deterrent, and that if we didn't have detention centres, then perhaps we'd have more people breaching the terms of their visas, or more people coming into the country who had no right to be here. And I think on those grounds, the success of detention is far less clear, both because, in fact, relative to the number of people who are already in breach of their visa conditions, the population who are detained is tiny, so 2,500 versus 180,000. But also because evidence from other areas shows that for any government response to be an effective deterrent, it has to be reliable, consistent, immediate and effective. And it's quite hard to argue that detention acts in any of those ways, because it normally comes at the very end of somebody's immigration history. So they've already tried many, many ways to stay, and so it's not particularly efficient, it's not particularly predictable, and it's not particularly reliable. So I think the jury's really still out about whether or not these places are effective.
Mary, thank you very much.
Thank you.